Welcome to a world where democracy, free speech, and pluralism are under threat.
The BBC, Rahul, is a methane-spewing landfill of lies, fraud and selectivity. And every now and then, the methane self-combusts and the putrid smell is all pervasive.
I find it disappointing as an Indian and a young Indian to see our old colonial rulers still trying to dabble in this country.
Is it a disproportionate response? Of course it is. When things are banned, when you block access to certain things, public curiosity rises.
In this video, we delve into the alarming clampdown on information and free speech in India. The once bastion of democracy has transformed into neo-fascist state, where dissent is a crime and independent media is muzzled and subdued. The story of the BBC documentary, The Tax Raid, and the Adani Group's controlling share in NDTV, are just a few examples of how the governments and their corporate backers are silencing voices that challenge their preeminence. This video is not for the faint-hearted, as we delve deep into the darkness that has engulfed the media landscape in India. Join us as we uncover the truth. Is India still a democracy? Or has it transitioned into being a fascist society? The storm in India over a carefully researched and crafted BBC documentary had barely begun to die down, when the international broadcaster's offices in Delhi and Mumbai were raided by tax authorities. The documentary had suggested that the UK government of the time had held Prime Minister Narendra Modi responsible for the killings in Gujarat 2 decades earlier, when he was the state's chief minister who allowed the murder of more than 1,000 Muslims on a false pretext. If such level of rape, murder and lynching happened in any Western country against a minority, someone would certainly have to pay for the crimes. But not in India, or at least not in the state where Modi was in power. He squashed all opposing news media and the judiciary also acting as accomplice. You have to think, how can the butchered and helpless minority get any help or support or justice?
Everybody in our country to stay, because our Muslim, they are also our brothers, we all are equal.
The events before and after this episode are an illustration of how India, once the bastion of democracy and free debate, has now clamped down on all information challenging the Hindu nationalist BJP's preeminence or threatening its reputation in any way. The supposed tax raid on the BBC and detention of some of the staff for over 24 hours was no more than a warning. The Indian government's response to the documentary was swift and severe. It used its massive commercial clout to have it killed on social media sites such as Twitter and YouTube.
The government issued directions for blocking multiple YouTube and Twitter posts sharing links to the controversial BBC documentary.
There was considerable criticism in India on the grounds of misplaced nationalism, but the documentary's content was hardly addressed. The BJP and its corporate backers control billions worth of advertising and have either co-opted or subdued most of the Indian media organizations, including some established ones that represented better journalism in the past. They are now a shadow of their former selves. Of course, notable exceptions exist, and one can only salute their resilience and commitment to independent journalism, and their desire to see their country represent pluralistic values rather than one dominant strain. This is even more remarkable given how grave the financial consequences can be of such editorial positions. Among mainstream TV news channels, NDTV represented one of the last perceived to have had relative independence. Then recently, news emerged that in one major swoop, the Modi-allied Adani Group had purchased a controlling share in the organization. What followed was an exodus of those responsible for directing that independent policy, and those executing it on the editorial floors and in the field. A few decades earlier, the same extremist political party, the BJP, led the demolition of the historical Babri Masjid. But the Gujarat massacres served as a major reality check. It was even more heartbreaking when the realization began to sink in that Indian democracy was being transformed into a neo-fascist state, where some of India's brightest sons and daughters were being imprisoned for publicly calling for pluralism and true democratic norms, and where dissent was now a crime. In India, the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, has co-opted or subdued the majority of the country's media organizations. The BJP is the political arm of the Hindu nationalist Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, RSS, a paramilitary organization that has long sought to establish a Hindu Rashtra, or Hindu nation, in India. The RSS and its affiliated groups have been accused of fomenting communal violence against religious minorities, particularly Muslims, and promoting a majoritarian and exclusionary ideology. This has led the Modi government to win elections by pitting the aggressive majority against the minority. The clampdown on free speech and independent journalism in India is part of a wider trend of authoritarianism and illiberalism that is spreading around the world. In recent years, we have seen similar attacks on the media and free expression in countries such as Russia, Turkey, Hungary, and the Philippines, among others. These attacks on democracy and human rights are often accompanied by the rise of populist leaders who appeal to people's fears and prejudices, and who seek to consolidate their power by undermining independent institutions and demonizing their opponents. In India, the BJP has been very successful in using this playbook, by promoting a nationalist and Hindu supremacist ideology, and by attacking anyone who disagrees with them as anti-national or anti-Hindu. They have been able to galvanize a large base of supporters and silence dissent. But as the recent farmer protests in India have shown, there is still a deep reservoir of democratic and progressive values in the country, despite the government's attempts to crush the protests and suppress the media coverage. The farmers and their supporters have continued to speak out and demand their rights. As citizens and as global citizens, it is our responsibility to support those who are fighting for democracy, human rights, and the rule of law in India and around the world. We must speak out against authoritarianism and censorship, and stand in solidarity with those who are being silenced and oppressed. Only by doing so can we hope to build a more just and democratic world for all.